Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this is part of the good stuff. This is the Sky and Telescope author series. And I'm very happy to have Bob King with us today. Hi, Bob.
Well, hi, Frank. Great to be here on a beautiful summer day.
On this beautiful June 28th, Monday, it is indeed lovely. And in fact, the temperature is down a little bit in Phoenix. So we'll only get up to, 35 C or something like that. So relatively lovely. And where are you at and how's the summer going there?
I am in Duluth, Minnesota, right here on the shore of Lake Superior. The summer has been going very well. I check my garden every day to see how the plants are doing, and everything is pushing up and getting higher. So that's good news. Relatively warm today for Duluth. It's in the low 80s.
Cool. What do you like to grow? What do you grow?
I've got, oh gosh, I threw in everything this year, mostly tomatoes, okay, because they're the key vegetable in any garden, in my opinion. But I've got corn there, cucumbers, a little bit of watermelon, some musk melons,
Wow.
and carrots and various other things. So I've got a little spot for everything.
That is so cool.
Yeah, mostly tomatoes though, because there's just nothing better than a really ripe tomato.
Right off the vine. Do you can or store any of them for later on?
Sometimes we freeze some things, yes, but I don't grow enough, I don't think, to can or that sort of thing.
Okay. Very
Just
cool.
eat it wild.
Yeah, very nice. Very cool. So I'm always curious how people get into astronomy or when they got into astronomy. So how did you get into it? And the sister question then is what do you like to do in astronomy? Because there's lots of things one can do. So,
well, I got into astronomy back when I was a kid, like a lot of amateur astronomers. For me, I think I was about 11 years old, and I took an interest in clouds. I found them just fascinating, and I believe there was an eclipse back in like 1963. I go back a long way, and that I remember wanting to see. I have a vague memory of going with my mother to a store to purchase a telescope. And I got my first telescope when I was about 11 years old.
Wow.
And all I wanted to do was destroy it. It was a small 2.5-inch Gilbert reflector.
Oh, okay.
And it was so, not the aperture so much, but it was so poorly made and so difficult to use that I longed for another scope. So eventually I got a little Japanese refractor, which is superb. And then I got an Edmund 6-inch reflecting telescope, which, by the way, I still have in the closet right next door to me. And it still works beautifully. I bought that with paper route money when I was 12 years old. And first I bought the mount because I didn't have enough money for the whole scope. And then I earned enough later that year to finally get the tube assembly and then put the scope together. And then it was just full throttle from that point. So
awesome.
I grew up in the Chicago area.
Oh, okay.
I'm not from Duluth. I've been here for many years, but I grew up in a suburb near Chicago called Morton Grove. And I used to belong to the Chicago Astronomical Society.
Oh,
Yeah, I gave my first talk there when I was like 15 years old. I couldn't believe it that they would allow me to do it. But I talked about how to find deep sky objects. And honestly, I still remember how nervous I was, but they were so kind to me.
So I take it a passion of yours is, or at least at one time, a passion of yours was deep sky objects.
Yes, it still is. Actually, and you had asked about that, what I do. I love to observe, and that is anything from naked eye, binoculars, telescope. I like just looking up at the Milky Way and being out in nature and just being carried along by the feeling that you feel when you're out there. But I also like the emotion and the excitement associated with discovery. And so I'll often select little things in the sky that maybe I've never seen before, or I'll take a path amongst deep sky objects and just explore. And so I love to explore deep sky. But to be honest, my favorite things are things that move, transients, things that change all the time. And that would include my number one love are comets, I think. And love, I just went crazy for comets after I saw a wonderful apparition of a modest comet called Churyumov 67P,
Mhm.
Churyumov-Gerasimenko. All right, the one the Rosetta mission went to.
Yes.
And after that, it kind of took off. So comets, variable stars, novae, supernovae, you name it, and planets and the sun, because these things are changing in real time. And I love following them to get a sense of their development and how things change. You know, you really get familiar. It's like living with someone. When you live with them, you really get to know them well. And so I like to know a comet well, or a planet too. And that makes me feel like I'm almost there if I can do that.
That's awesome.
You
That is.
got to defeat space and time. I mean, you got to cross that gap somehow. And
Mhm.
I think familiarity, along with knowledge that you bring to whatever the observation is, really can make a connection for you.
Nice. Nice. And speaking of connections, that is going to bring us to this very lovely regular column of yours, which is the celestial calendar. And this will be for July 2021. And Bob, take us away.
Yeah, this is the most recent one. I haven't read this one yet. I'm still on the June issue, but every month I write the celestial calendar column for Sky and Telescope, in addition to my blog for the website. The blog's called Explore the Night. But in this, for July, we looked at two minor bodies in the solar system. July was sort of a slow month, except for Pluto. So every year we like to revisit Pluto because it's kind of a
Mhm.
special challenge for amateur astronomers. People like to try to find Pluto, and it is getting further, or I should say, farther and farther away from us. And so we only have so many years before you need a large telescope to see it.
Excellent.
So talked about Pluto, some of the characteristics of the planet, how to find it, key guide stars that will help get you there. Because if you're a visual observer, you sort of have to know where to start to
Mhm.
star hop and move. So I identified a couple of key guide stars. I worked with Gary Saronic, my editor, and he put together this very wonderful chart of Pluto that shows its motion, so you could track it all the way through the year. And after Pluto, I often do a second or third feature too. And that next feature was on a little asteroid called Hebe.
Hebe.
Hebe, just a wonderful word to say, isn't
I
it?
know. It just rolls right off the tongue. Hebe. Sounds happy too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I agree. So Hebe is an asteroid, and you can see it. Obviously, right now there's the arc of it as it passes through Aquila and Sagittarius. And one of the interesting things, and I love writing about asteroids like Hebe, if we can connect a particular asteroid to a meteorite that maybe has been picked up on the Earth, or to a certain class of meteorites, to me, that forms a wonderful connection between an object in space, which we cannot touch, to something that you actually can touch. And I've got a little meteorite right here, Frank. Can I show it to you?
Absolutely.
Here's a little one.
I'm going to come out of
This-
screen here just to
this-
look at that. Put it up again.
I'll put it up again. This one here, you can see it's got a little, can you see that sparkle?
Yeah. Where's that? Which
And
which one is that?
this is a fairly recent fall, and it has kind of, but it used to be called Gadamus. Here, let me just make sure I pronounce it right. It's called Hamada Alhamra 346. It
Okay.
is an L6 chondrite, and
Mhm.
you can see the sparkle of iron nickel flakes in there. And there's also a dark line that's a shock vein in the meteorite, and it has beautiful black fusion crust because it's a relatively recent fall. But Hebe, apparently, as we look at the spectra from Hebe, we study the light reflected from the asteroid. It pairs up pretty closely with a particular class of meteorites called the H chondrites. And
Yes.
H chondrites are very common meteorites that are found on Earth. They're falling to Earth now, they've fallen in the past. So you can literally buy an H chondrite, look up at Hebe, and kind of think, I may very well have a piece of that little star-like point right here in my hand. So I enjoy, especially when asteroids can we can connect a particular asteroid to a certain class of meteorites, just as we can, say, the asteroid Vesta with the class of achondritic meteorites called Howardites, Eucrites, and Diogenites, pardon me. So I like to try to include those details in an article.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when you look at the asteroid, you realize, oh, this is responsible for something that acts actually here on the Earth.
Very cool. Very
So
cool.
there's lots of different, each month I have to come up with different topics. I sort of explore things in some depth. And
Yeah.
it can be an asteroid. I've done eclipses. I'll look at meteor showers. These are mentioned in other parts in the magazine, but I like to go in a little bit deeper or maybe find sort of a fresh take on it, something interesting that hasn't been reported on so much, and include that.
Nice.
Part of it. Oh, pardon me. Go ahead, Frank.
I was just going to ask, since you mentioned eclipse, were you able to see the annular eclipse in June?
Yes, indeed, I was able to see the annular eclipse in June. And I have to thank Kelly Beatty with Sky and Telescope, who invited me. I boarded a plane with a whole bunch of other eclipse chasers down in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
St. Paul. Yeah, at the airport, along with Kelly. Kelly arranged this whole thing to see the annular eclipse. When I was offered that, I thought, I'd sort of like to see it from the ground because, you get the clouds and the sunrise. And then I realized I can't pass this up. This is just incredible to see an eclipse from the air, plus guaranteed clear skies. That was fun. So we met in a hotel down there. And then that next morning, very early, I woke up at 1:30 in the morning to get ready for that flight. We all did. And then we went through the TSA check and got on the airplane. And if I remember right, we left right around 3 o'clock in the morning and then headed north towards the eclipse path, towards the path of annularity. And the way it was arranged was the plane was only half full, so that when it turned finally to go northeast, or pardon me, northwest, everybody would have a seat, a window seat facing the eclipse. There was a lot of excitement on board. I want to tell you, people saying,
What kind of plane was this? What kind of plane was this?
this is a Delta. It was an Airbus. I don't know the
Oh,
specific
okay.
number, but it's a Delta Airbus. And you're going to like this, Frank, because they had, an eclipse, that's serious business. You have to be there on time, right? So as a backup, they actually had a second plane fueled and ready to go, parked right next to our plane, just in case there any trouble on the ground,
Which does happen. Yep.
which
Wow.
does happen. So, but everything worked well. When the plane did turn, you could practically hear the heartbeats, the pulses inside the cockpit there. And we turned, and the sun was sort of involved in the clouds, still kind of wrapped up in high cirrus clouds coming up above the horizon. You couldn't quite see it. And so Kelly asked the pilots if they could possibly go to the maximum altitude, just so we could get that sun up out of the clouds, which they did. Fantastic pilots they were. And there it was, this rhino horn kind of just came out of the clouds, just poked out, like a rhinoceros lifting its horn from a swamp of clouds. And it was absolutely brilliant. It was so bright because we were above much of the atmosphere when you're at 39,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to do filtered views the entire time. So I was taking pictures, through the camera, filtered, and then also occasionally getting up and photographing other people with their setups. And I think the moment of first seeing that horn come up above the clouds, that really caught my heart. And then unexpectedly, about midway through the eclipse, just before annularity, I could sense that the moon was in the foreground. And so there was a sense of watching this event in 3 dimensions.
Nice.
That was palpable.
Nice.
And that touched me as well. Plus just the combined excitement, enthusiasm, the people hollering, and clapping and whatever. And afterwards, you know, we stay with the eclipse for, I don't know the exact number of minutes, maybe 20, 25.
Hmm.
And pilots turned the plane. There was applause, and then there was a champagne toast, and then we headed on back. And there's a little funny thing about the trip. It was on Delta, and I get frequent flyer miles on Delta. However, on this trip, and maybe you know this, because it originated in Minneapolis and it returned to Minneapolis, it therefore flew nowhere. Exactly, exactly 0 miles for that flight. But was anybody counting? No.
No.
I've met wonderful people. I'm still emailing some of the folks. You know, I have developed some friendships too out of going on an eclipse like that. Any shared adventure is an opportunity for that. So
Very
it's a
cool.
wonderful time, and I'm really grateful to Sky and Telescope for the opportunity.
So has the bug bitten? Will you be going? Are you now an eclipse chaser, and you'll be on every single flight from here to eternity?
Eternity, yeah. Well, my goal, because I heard people describe what totality looks like from a plane,
Mm.
and it's quite different than being on the ground. I mean, there's similarities, but there's a certain sense of seeing that moon shadow from up above. And so I have sworn to myself, if nothing else, I am going to go on a totality eclipse. I'm going to fly into totality.
Cool.
That is in my future. Cross my fingers.
Well, we got one coming up, right?
Yep, we do have one coming up in 2024. I will probably go with friends on the ground to see that one.
Okay.
Because we can drive to it, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, you're fairly close to it. I'll have to drive south, but if I can get there in a car, I'll go. But if I can't get there in a car, well, then the plane is an option.
Very nice. Very nice. You should make sure you try and look at the moons of Jupiter here while you're on that plane.
Yeah, I was taking pictures when we were on the plane since it took off at morning twilight. My face was pressed to the window, trying to see what I could of the constellations, and I was able to identify Jupiter and Saturn and see them in the constellation of Capricornus.
Okay.
Yeah, before dawn hit.
Very nice.
We're also looking for Noctilucent clouds,
Mm-hmm.
which were, I should tell you about those here if we do have a minute to talk about them.
Sure.
We did not see Noctilucent clouds on that flight, but this is the season for them right now.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Speaking of which, what I'd like to try to do, and always then what I will write about, are these little adventures. And right now, I'm taking kind of an adventure. I mean, the sky to me, it's like you've probably gone wilderness camping and all of that, I assume, or been out in the wild somewhere.
Yep.
The sky to me is just like that. It's just totally open up. It's total wilderness. And you get out there and you find your way through that wilderness, and you could spend all night up there. And by the way, when you're looking at this or that globular cluster or a nebula, there are things happening around you in nature too. There might be owls, frogs, a deer that snorts that scares the heck out of you. But my current little wilderness adventure, if you want to call it that, is looking for noctilucent clouds, which are these night glowing clouds that are most prominent right around the summer solstice, so right now. And they form, what's unique about them is that they're not in the lower layer of the atmosphere, the troposphere. Instead, they're in the mesosphere, like 51, 52 miles high. And they form, the water vapor that gets up there condenses on the soot particles left behind by meteors. And so you're actually seeing clouds that form on meteor smoke.
That is amazing.
Isn't that amazing? And you can see this. It's almost like we've got a terrestrial, extraterrestrial hybrid type cloud, you know, a connection with outer space.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it is so cool. And the clouds are normally visible at fairly northern latitudes, like north of 45 degrees, 47 degrees. But in recent years, they've been sort of moving southward.
Okay.
So in this past season, people have been sighting them as far south as southern Spain, down to like 39 degrees north.
Okay.
So it's possible to see them, not just, in the northern fringe of Minnesota, North Dakota, in Canada, Finland, and so on. But last night, let me tell you, Frank, just quick here. Last night, I drove to my usual spot, and as I'm driving, I'm seeing these billowy clouds across the sky, thinking, my gosh, what's happening here? Is the sky clouding over? I didn't see this on the satellite images. Well, it turned out to be the Noctilucent clouds. They're normally just a thin little layer on the northern horizon. They filled the western sky.
Wow.
Crazy looking things.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could show you a photo if you want me to do a screen share.
Sure.
Would you like to see an image? Is that
I
something we
would
can
love
do?
to see an image. Let me get out of here and give me one half a second here. And all yours. Go ahead and share.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow. Nice.
I've only got it small. Sorry, I can't enlarge it either.
All good.
But there's that. And here they are.
Wow.
This is over a lake, a small lake just north of where I live. And this exactly matches the visual impression. The picture really fits here because you see their blue color and they're stringy. I don't know how to describe that.
Wispy.
Wispy, kind of like my hair. My hair.
I wouldn't know anything about that. I don't know. It looks wispy to me.
But it's then reflected in the lake too. So that was awfully nice. So yeah, it's kind of a thing that happens in the summertime right now through the rest of June. And then let me stop share through the rest of June and then through the month of July into the very beginning of August. And it's just one example of something you can see, or you can go out when it's dark and look for the asteroid Hebe, which is a faint it's bright enough to see in the smallest of telescopes. So there's always so much that the sky offers when you're out.
You've already gone through 5, 6. It's great.
Yeah, right. The thing to me that's most important about writing about these things for Sky and Telescope is to provide enough context and information in a way, and I hope I succeed at this. I'm sure sometimes I do not, because everything is a work in progress, but to provide enough context so that when someone just looks at a point of light, and let's be honest, a lot of these astronomical objects are just that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dots, just dots. But if you have just a few interesting bits of information about it, you can understand it and appreciate it. It's like knowing a little bit about art history or architecture to enhance your appreciation of a painting or a building.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of factual information, and then the real on the ground, boots on the ground things that amateurs do, which is to just go out there and look at the stuff. I mean, that's what we're all up to as amateurs and as writers and purveyors of astronomy, right? Is we are excited and passionate. We want to share it so that other people be like, I think I'll give that a look. And the goal behind this is, well, it's inspiring. Part of it is, you're exercising your problem solving skills when you locate these objects. But the goal is pleasure, right? It's feeling an emotion.
Yes.
It really is. You want to walk away. You want to feel some pleasure at having been out there and appreciated the beauty that is in nature. And again, that includes the whole 360 as an amateur, to be aware of the clouds passing, air glow, the noises of the night, and so on. So there's great joy in that. And I think that joy in our lives just makes us happier people. Wait a minute, didn't we just start at
awesome. You're a philosopher too. This is just awesome.
Oh, yeah.
You are awesome. Very cool. Let's see. So we got some Jupiter. We got some stuff going on with Jupiter. I love this. I love these maps. In this case, it's a barber pole of motion. And let's give a shout out. Who did this one?
You know, that I'm embarrassed to say I don't specifically know who did that map, but Sky and Telescope has carried a version of that map since I subscribed to the magazine back in
Yeah.
the 60s. It's really pretty now the way it's done. It's very attractive. But it would be, I assume, the graphic staff at the magazine, including Greg Dinderman and others.
Mhm.
I'm always grateful for the beautiful maps. I think Sky and Telescope just does a superb job on maps, and maps are key. I mean, some amateurs, granted, they've got go-to, they can just hit the button on the iPad and go there. But a lot of us still just kind of go out and like to poke around the sky, and so these maps are most useful.
Indeed.
And the Jupiter one is nice at a glance. This whole starting in late spring and now through summer and into fall, there's a special feature too on each of these celestial calendars about mutual phenomena, which I think you might, there it is, selected mutual satellite events.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that happens every few years. The plane of Earth's orbit with the sun lines up with the plane of Jupiter's brightest four moons. And so instead of them passing above and below one another as they circle the planet, they will cross in front of each other for an occultation, or one might eclipse the other. We call those mutual satellite events. And so this is the season. This is a cool thing. I believe it's every, I want to say 8 years or 9 years that this happens. It's not often, but it's a special season happening now, and worth checking out. You can look through your telescope, even a small scope, and if it's a deep eclipse or occultation, you'll see the moon kind of fade away, and you'll know you're witnessing an eclipse. And then you put it into the context of, I've seen an eclipse on Earth. And that, once again, you make kind of a connection between what's happening way the heck out there, 400 million miles away, and what's happening and can be seen right here on the ground.
Indeed.
There's other things. I made a short list here of some of the things that I'd like to write about, because I also do the blog, and the blog is something that I do it every 2 weeks. It used to be weekly, and I started that in 2015. It's called Explore the Night, and in the blog, it's more current, right? Because the deadline is like, it's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might feature a bright comet or a current nova, or, anything that's happening in the moment, which are, again, exciting events. So
Yeah, we'll put a link to the blog in the description below the video. Check it out.
All right. Well, thank you for doing that. So when I do the blog, sometimes I'm bereft of ideas. Every once in a while, when you're doing it weekly, you wonder, what am I going to do this week? And it's really true. I love to walk. I like hiking. And just walking is great for me because it helps me solve things and work things out in my head. And when I walk at night, sometimes I'll just look up at the sky when I don't have an idea. And sort of like waiting for a meteor, I kind of wait for an idea to fall
Inspiration. There we go. Boom.
into my head. And the sky has inspired many times with ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, that's up there, isn't it? Well, I haven't written about that, so that might make a good topic.
Speaking of, want to drop a few hints on what might be in the August or September calendar?
Well, actually, right now, I just turned in my material for the October issue.
Okay.
So that's so what is that? July, September, anyway, 3.5.
About 3 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Prior. And so
Yeah.
I turned that in, and it's about one of my very favorite topics. It really is. And I've tried to get some good information in there. It's about the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis.
Yeah.
And yeah, we see it up here in Duluth fairly frequently because of the latitude and also our relation to the auroral oval, that big crown of northern lights that sits up there over the North Magnetic Pole.
Mhm.
but it's about the aurora. And the reason why it's for the October issue is because careful study of the northern lights has shown that auroras are more frequent at the equinoxes. And March and October are the two best months of the year for viewing potential auroras.
Mhm.
And the sun is on the uptick in the solar cycle,
Mhm.
and it's October, so it seemed like an ideal topic.
Very cool. Very
Yeah, so it'll be about that. And then there's a small section about a comet called Comet Faye.
Yeah, you did say you liked the comments. All right.
Yeah, I I made a special journal just for Halley's Comet.
Uh,
Every observation and sketch. I
very
I
cool.
really enjoyed Halley.
Very nice. So there you go, people. There's something to look forward to. The October issue of Sky and Telescope is some of the features that you'll be able to read and marvel at those graphics. So very cool. Bob, I want to thank you so much for spending some time and walking us through your column and your blog and your airplane trip and all the things I learned.
You've been great. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been a blast. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.